Hello and welcome, it's Debs here. I want to talk to you today about how practical looking in a spiritual direction is in our normal, ordinary, everyday lives. You know, in those areas where we can sometimes have concerns and problems, our relationships, our health, our finances, those things that seem really real and down to earth, those things are the places for me. When I started on my spiritual journey, when I began looking in this direction, I was not interested in something woo-woo that was out there that was not going to help me on a really practical level. I was not long out of an incredibly abusive relationship, and I was really struggling to parent my children. I had a young son, I had a teenage daughter, and I had a young adult daughter. And I was in a terrible mess. I was really insecure. I was feeling really, really guilty because of what had happened to my children. I hated myself, absolutely loathed myself because of what my children had been through and some of the things that I had done. I couldn't believe that I had allowed the things that had happened to happen. And I was in a terrible, terrible mess trying to parent these three seemingly damaged children, trying to help myself and coming across spirituality. If it wasn't going to help me in ordinary, normal, everyday things, I just hadn't got the time for it. And much to my surprise, it turned out to be incredibly practical. So whether you are looking in this direction because you have a problem like me, a relationship problem, whether it be with your other half, whether it be with a colleague at work, whether it be with a family member, or all over, whatever, whether it is a relationship thing, whether it is a health thing, because equally I have found that spirituality is incredibly practical in health issues and in financial issues. In fact, no matter what, this is a really practical direction to look in. And what I want to say is that the first thing that I began to understand was the huge role that thought played in my experience of life, but not only my experience of life, how life actually is. When we begin to look in the direction of quantum physics, we begin to see that we are not a standalone, we are not here having an experience of life, we are actually integrated, we are a part of an actual intimate part of it. And so as we change, life changes. So I began to see that we as human beings, I was made up of a collection of thoughts that I believed to be true. A collection of thoughts and I am statements without even realizing that's what they were. I was making statements about myself and living out being a certain way. And with the thoughts that I was having that I believed to be true, thoughts like I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and they maybe weren't as clear cut as that and even words in my head in that way, but the spiritual nature of thought, who I fundamentally believed myself to be, I can see that was true. I didn't believe that I was lovable, I didn't feel safe, and I didn't believe that I was good enough. And I was trying to get those things from outside of me. Now, being on that trajectory, I had no alternative but to be in the type of relationship, an abusive relationship, that there was nothing else that could possibly have played out. If that's who I was being, that was what I was going to create out here in my human life. And we are all the same. It seems that we have moment to moment, we have choice about what we're going to do, but we are all on a trajectory with the thoughts that we have that we believe to be true. We are headed in a very specific direction. But one of the most amazing things about human life is the possibility for it to entirely change direction. When we begin to awaken to the truth of who we are, awaken to the power that we have within us, we can think differently. We can set ourselves on an entirely different trajectory. We can question our thinking and allow something completely different to arise within us and head in a very different direction, which was exactly what I did. And I began to head in an incredibly practical, incredibly amazing direction. Because what I see, as I said, when I first started looking in this direction, I had 3 children. I had a young son at the time. I had a teenage daughter and a young adult daughter. And I had no idea how to parent them. I was really struggling. I was feeling very insecure. I hated myself, absolutely loathed myself for what I had done, what I had allowed to happen to my children. And I needed some real practical help to see that differently and to be someone different. And so coming across an understanding of how our minds work and the huge role that the thinking that we have, that we believe to be true, plays in our moment-to-moment experience and plays in the creating of the life, the trajectory that we are on. Beginning to see that, beginning to see something as simple as you don't have to think that. Like, I would have the thought that I'm not good enough. And as I said, it might not necessarily be those exact words in my head, but just a feeling of, oh my gosh, here we go again. You've done this stupid thing. You're not good enough. Whatever it was, just seeing you don't have to think that. And just knowing that I didn't have to think that opened me up to the possibility of thinking something different. And as my thoughts began to change, as what I believed about myself began to change, because that is a natural byproduct of us thinking differently, my life began to be completely different. And I began to see that we all as human beings have desires. When I was in my abusive relationship, I had the desire to feel loved and to be free, to feel safe. I had all of these desires, and I was trying to make those desires happen by manipulating and changing the outside world. And what I began to see as I looked in a spiritual direction was the outside world, the world that we look on, the world that we believe is reality, is actually a projection of our true reality, which is our spirituality, which comes from within. So what we project, what happens out here, what we experience and live out here has to be, it is a projection, it has to be a reflection of what is going on in here. And so when I began to question my thinking and think differently, when I began to realize I did not have to think in the way that I did not have to think against myself, there were other possibilities that literally changed everything. And my desire that allowed me to create that desire from within me, the desire to feel loved, the desire to feel very, very loved, actually woke this up in me, actually had me heading in a spiritual direction. If you are here and you are watching this video, the same thing is happening to you. You have got a desire within you to wake up to something different, to see something different, and you are watching this video so that to help you go in that direction. Now, what I would say is, we can't do that on the outside. This has to be an internal change. We create trajectories with the thinking that we believe to be true. We create like rails along what we will think and do and how our lives will be. I've seen that time and time again with when I worked with people after I got out of my relationship, when I worked with people who had been in abusive relationships, unless their thinking fundamentally changed, if they got out of one relationship, unless something fundamentally changed, they would stay on that same trajectory, those same rails, and they would inevitably create the same or a very similar situation again. And I could see that I was in danger of doing that. Luckily for me, this desire that I had to create love and freedom in my life led me to have a different thought which I followed, which I gave my attention to. I took my attention away from the thinking that I had had about myself for so long. And that was one of the most difficult things that I did, but doing that created something completely different and new for me. So although I felt lots of shame, lots of self-hatred, lots of self-loathing about what had happened during that relationship, when I had the thought that maybe I was lovable, I was prepared to take a chance on that. And that began a completely new trajectory. And what I see now is where I am now, I'm in a space where I have the desire to create an amazing home, to buy a piece of land and create an amazing home. And I am watching me follow that desire. I'm watching the thoughts that arise that get in the way of that desire becoming a reality out in form, out in the world here. And I'm watching the possibility of that happening if I believe those thoughts, that if I am prepared, if I think against myself and believe those thoughts and bring them into reality, into the world out here, it slows everything down. If I stay true and faithful to how I know this works, the thoughts that I have that I know that this is a possibility, if I keep those thoughts alive and look in that direction, then I know what is going to happen next. And I don't doubt that anymore. Do I sometimes get confused and go in the wrong direction? Absolutely, yes. But I don't stay with those thoughts very long anymore, because I know how this works. I know that life works in this way. But like you, my thoughts can look and seem and feel incredibly real at times. But if there is nothing else you take from this video, but really, really, truly knowing that if you ever have a thought that has you feeling that you are not good enough or not lovable, you don't have to believe that thought. And one of the things that you absolutely have to do is play with this. You can't listen to something and expect change to happen. You have to, when you have listened to this video, go away and spend a few minutes looking at the thoughts that you have, that you bring to life, that you see as real and true, and play at thinking something different. You have something amazing on your side. You have the ability to imagine. You have an imagination, and you can use your imagination, which is exactly what I did, to entirely change your life. You can imagine what it would be like if you were thinking something completely different. And when you get lost in your imagination and looking in that direction, there are certainly ways you can what's the word I'm looking for? We can get better and better at that. And I will talk about that in videos moving forward if you want me to. Drop a comment here if you'd like me to talk more about how we can play in our imagination in ways that really create amazing things. Because I can see that is what I did around my relationship, and what I am doing now around my building my house. I'm having so much fun in my imagination with this, and then watching it come to life out in the world of form. So I'm really, really happy to share more about that. If you would like me to, comment below and I will do it. So, because once we have changed the trajectory of where we are going, like I said, when I was in an abusive relationship and on that trajectory, I had zero choice but to go in that direction. That was what was going to happen. Now I am going in a different direction, and totally different direction. That is set in motion, and that is where I am headed. That is what is going to happen next. So if you are interested in changing your trajectory, changing how you think and where the life you are creating with yourself, play in your imagination. Sit for a minute and imagine who you would be if whatever it was, the desire that you have within you, what would happen if that desire came to be, and play with that. Because following that desire, you don't have to know how it's going to happen, but following that desire is key. So I love you guys. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Please do feel free to comment below if you have any comments or questions, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye for now.